chat?
What monk chat is? Does anyone know? You don't know what monk chat is? That's
Oh.
certainly understandable, yeah.
We got a
Anyone?
question.
You don't know what monk chat is? Wow, okay.
I looked at it, but I'm 43.
I'm just kidding.
So this
Are we live?
We are live, yes.
Hello, we're live. Hello,
For
everyone.
now.
So yes, I just realized we're live. My name is Bhante Wade Baripano, and this is Ayawada with me, here for the regular Friday evening monk chat. And monk chat is an opportunity for everyone to type in questions or ask questions for those of us who are with us live on any topic related to Buddhism. And we'll do our best to answer. And we're very pleased. We realized we didn't make this live stream until a few minutes ago, and so it wasn't scheduled up on the web and everything until just a few minutes ago. So we wondered if anyone was going to show up. And of course, we have a great group of lay yogis here who are staying at the monastery to ask questions, but also seeing many people typing in. So wonderful to see you all.
Looks like Jayanta said good evening, and Mariah, there is a live stream.
There is a live stream, yes.
And Karuna, and John, Bhumika, Yankee, Maria, Amit.
I once had a good friend named Amit.
Oh.
All right. Wonder where he is now.
Oh, hello, Mary.
Mary. Bhante Sudasu was very grateful for the throat lozenges, Mary. Sadhu Anumotana, your generosity.
And we do have some questions already, Ajahn. Should we turn to them? Or would you like to?
Sure. We had the idea we were going to inform everyone that we'll take one question per questioner until we work our way through all the questions, all the people, and then we'll start with the second questions from questioners, if they have any, and that way we can try to keep to time and hopefully answer a question from at least every person who has a question, if possible. And we'll give the lay yogis who are staying here a chance to ask questions as well, of course. And okay, sure, let's go ahead and see what our first question is.
Okay. Amit says his name means friend.
Means friend? Oh wow, how about that?
Okay.
Mm-hmm.
Well, it looks like the question here is, how important is daily meditation practice?
How important is it? Well, I guess it depends on what your priorities are, but see, it's a little bit of a cheeky answer. If you ask a Buddhist monk how important is daily meditation practice, it's very important. Modern science tells us that if you meditate 20 minutes every day, over time it'll have tremendous benefits for you, for your IQ, and for your physical health, and for your emotional health. You'll be better able to manage your emotions, and you'll feel better over time. This is speaking of mindfulness meditation. So you'll grow in EQ as well, and your emotional intelligence, that is. And I've read that studies show that if you practice loving kindness meditation regularly, then it has even greater benefit for your EQ, your emotional IQ, than mindfulness meditation. So that's in brief that you can read about these studies on the internet. There are quite a few articles about it on the internet. So that's from a modern scientific point of view. And they say that even from what I've read, I read a book in which a medical doctor, he was an associate clinical professor at a medical school, wrote that you can even split it up into 2 10-minute sessions per day and have these benefits. So very convenient from that point of view. And the more you meditate, the better it is. Hopefully that'll be motivating. From the religious point of view, it's very valuable for displacing negative emotions. we have the concept in Buddhist philosophy of the three defilements, and there are actually many different kinds of classifications of these, but one very important one is the three defilements known as the three roots of unskillful action, a broad category of greed and a broad category of aversion, and a third category called delusion. It could also be called liking and disliking and delusion. And different meditations are useful for displacing different defilements out of the mind. So for example, loving kindness meditation is especially good for displacing anger and hatred out of the mind. It can also be very good for anxiety as well. And meditation on the repulsive aspects of the body can be very good for displacing greed for things. And meditation on the breathing, on the breath, can be very good for displacing discursive thought, so a lot of chatter in the mind. These are just some examples. And so those that give you an indication of how they can help us immediately, but also meditation is an indispensable aspect of the path to enlightenment, going off the round of rebirths and attaining immortality and complete freedom from suffering. So for we faithful Buddhists, it's very important to us. I wonder if you'd like to add anything on that.
I think that was good. I'm done. I don't have anything to add unless you have other thoughts.
So it's very important.
Right.
Very valuable.
Sadhu. Okay. He says, oh, he meant to type on. Oh, he's just a type. Okay. And John has a question. John asks, why is Vitaka not included in the 5 Kandas? Well, it depends on how you look at it. So it's not listed directly in the 5 Kandas. Maybe for those who don't know, these are 2 Pali words, so it might be confusing for people watching later or new to Buddhism. So the 5 Kandas are one way that the Buddha talked about essentially breaking down our experience and our what we tend to identify with, especially, into 5 kind of broad categories. So these are in Pali, Rupa, Vedana, Sanya, Sankhara, and Vijnana. And that roughly means something like form, mostly the body, or what we might consider physicality, physical things and physical properties. And then Vedana means feeling or sensation. So the kind of direct felt, immediate sensation or tone, feeling tone of experience, like pain, pleasure, or something neutral. And then you have Sanya, which means something like perception, recognition, conceptualization. So this is the way that the mind uses concepts and memories and associations and picking up signs and features in order to recognize and form a kind of perception of what's happening. So we perceive cups and computers and people and faces and colors because the mind can kind of collect data and form it into a coherent perception. And then there's Sankhara, which means the more kind of close definition would be volition, or sometimes it's translated as mental formations or volitional formations. Volitional activities is the most recent translation by Bhikkhu Bodhi. And this primarily in the suttas, the Buddha defines it as 6 types of volition. So it's the kind of reactive aspect of the mind, the willpower of the mind, the controlling aspect of the mind, the intention of the mind. But this would include also things like, generally speaking, we could say it includes things like vitaka, which is meaning of this is thought or a kind of movement of the mind. This vitaka is a kind of thinking or a kind of way that the mind applies itself to think and consider and reflect over different experiences. So we would generally include this under the category of sankhara. And in the Abhidhamma and in later Buddhist tradition, sankhara basically means everything that isn't feeling and perception that's in the mind apart from consciousness. So that would also include vitaka. There's kind of an official Abhidharma list of all the different mental qualities, vitaka being one of them. But we can also just simplify it and say, okay, vitaka is a kind of intentional aspect of the mind, or it's something that the mind produces through intentions. It might be more complicated. For example, our thoughts might also involve perceptions and feelings, but at the same time, they're kind of created and formed out of this volitional aspect, this directing aspect of the mind. And just for completeness, for those who aren't familiar, the fifth one is consciousness or awareness. So I would say that vitaka is included. I would just say it's kind of hidden in there, in the category of sankhara, the category of volitional activities or volitional formations.
I have a question. I'm not familiar with the sixfold classification of the sankharas, and so I wonder how it compares to the classification by I guess 52 different mental factors. How does it compare to the 52 fit into those 6 categories, or is it totally different?
Well, in the suttas themselves, the Buddha only defines it as the 6 types of intention, cetana. But in the Abhidhamma, they define sankhara as the cetasikas, which are all the mental factors except for feeling and perception. I think my feeling is that they probably did that because to make it more complete and well-rounded, and because maybe intention helps construct those. But in the suttas themselves, we only see intention in the definition of sankhara, specifically, at least from the Buddha.
I've seen very vague definitions attributed to the suttas of sankharas being like even intended is the kanda of sankhara rather than kind of a broader scope, but actually anything that is formed. And so even the assertion that some of the other khandhas, at least some of the other khandhas, actually fit within that one, or could be categorized under that one. Is that, I wonder what you think of that, a very vague definition like that, anything that is formed up. Yeah.
Well, I guess I should say, yeah, there is one place where the Buddha defines, he says, see if I can remember it, because it's kind of a pun. Okay. He says, like, why are they called sankhara? He says,
right.
Sankatama bisankaronti iti. So he says, they construct what is constructed. He says, what do they construct? They construct form into its state of form. They construct feeling into the state of feeling. They construct perception and also sankharas and consciousness. But the way I always read it was that he's saying karma is what constructs and volition is what constructs things, whereas the products would be the sankata. But I do think that could be a way of reading it, and I do think some traditions maybe do read it like that. Maybe some teachers would read it like that.
Oh, okay.
So it's, yeah.
Very interesting. Okay, thank you.
Good job. Okay. So this is a question from just one letter here. Not sure the name. Greetings, Bhantes. How is the teacher-student relationship viewed and conducted in the Buddha Dhamma?
This is about, it's so important in the Buddha Dhamma. It's like a question about meditation. How important is meditation? And the teacher-student relationship is viewed as being very important as well, kind of on par. So, give you a sense. One point in the suttas, the Buddha says that the 2 most important things to a new practitioner are the practitioner's own sense of appropriate attention. That is, paying attention to those things that they should pay attention to and appropriately. And the second one being a wise companion or suitable companions to help them on the path. So you have an internal monitor and guide for your actions, and also an external monitor and guide for your actions. And perhaps it's this very kind of teaching that prompted Venerable Ananda, the Buddha's attendant, to say that he thought that the Kalyana Mitta, a term commonly used in Buddhism, meaning the beautiful friend, is fully half of the holy life. The holy life really typically referring to the monastic life, but also in a way it can be seen as any life that is spiritual. You know? And the Buddha responded, don't say that. He said, actually, the beautiful friend is the whole of the holy life. He says, just think about it. Where would you be if I hadn't come along? And so the Buddha emphasizing that the beautiful friend which is a term for someone who helps us on the spiritual path, and also, according to Theravada tradition, is also recognized at the highest level of being the teacher. Is indispensable to the spiritual life. And so we even have for us monastics, we have in our voluminous code of discipline, our code of conduct, very detailed protocols for how the teachers and students should interact with each other. And in fact, a new monastic has a teacher for life and a dependency relationship on a teacher for life in their preceptor. That's the head monastic at their ordination, who presides over the ordination ceremony, accepting them into the community. So they have responsibilities to each other right from the moment of ordination until the end of their lives, until the end of one of their lives. And so that's tremendously important. And I think, personally, I think that's why if we look at the suttas, we have a tremendous amount of detail in the suttas, and also in some ways the suttas can be somewhat vague. Not to criticize them, I think it's actually one of the strengths of the suttas in some areas. And for example, if we look at the Anapanasati Sutta in the Majjhima Nikaya, one of very important sutta on meditation, about breath meditation, Anapanasati meaning mindfulness of in and out breathing. And if we look at those 16 steps, we have a nice roadmap to how to practice breath meditation. But if we look at it for details, we see we might become frustrated. And I think the Buddha laid out these 16 steps as he did, somewhat vaguely, because the practice of meditation should be tailored by a teacher to the student in their time and place. Because the meditation is for each individual an art. And so just one kind of one personal thought I have on the importance of the teacher, that for the monastics, the Buddha considered that the student-teacher relationship would be fundamental to the development of a student. And we can see this reflected in various ways, both explicitly in how the code of conduct is written for the monastics, and also in these kinds of things in terms of where the canon is somewhat vague in instructions for us. So maybe that's what I'll say. I wonder if you could add anything.
Oh, no, I don't think so, John.
Okay. Hope that's helpful.
Yeah. Okay. Nick, who I believe is a layperson, asks, what is the difference between judgment and discernment? Oh, I don't know. Maybe, Ajahn, you have some thoughts as well. Maybe I can mention a few things that come to mind. But the thing is, one of the problems maybe is that when we say judgment, I've noticed there's a tendency to be kind of two camps here. One is judgment meaning specifically a kind of negative mental state of aversiveness and kind of critiquing others or critiquing the situation or scenarios and things, but in a way that's unwholesome. And then the other camp is, well, actually now three are coming to mind. The other camp is judgment in terms of judging between things, and which is maybe where you're asking the difference between it. And this is closely related to the aversion, because maybe we judge what's good and what's wrong, or we judge, judging right from wrong, or judging that this is a good friend and this is a bad friend, like the discussion of the Kalyanamitta. We have to find also who is not a good friend to associate with. And then the other related meaning of judgment might be like judging people in the sense of punishing them, or deciding a punishment for them, or deciding rewards for them. Like judging, like we might say divine judgment or a legal judgment of some sort. But I doubt that that's what you mean here. So the only thing that maybe comes to mind in terms of discriminating between judgment and discernment would be that if we take judgment in the negative sense, as a kind of discerning between things but critiquing them and feeling very harsh towards certain ones because they don't fit the requirements that we like, then we could make this distinction that discernment and judgment come very close together, but one has aversion and one is more wise and effective at helping our spiritual growth. Right, so we might say judging people might be thinking, oh, I really don't like that person's shirt, and I hate this person's voice, and the paint in this room is too dark, and the food is not cold enough, or it's not warm enough, or it's not sweet enough, or it's too spicy, or it's too salty. So that kind of judgment is really just liking and disliking, building up preferences, and discerning between things in a way that builds our defilements, especially with aversion in mind. But then discernment might be things like, this mental quality helps me grow, helps me be more kind, helps me be more gentle, whereas this mental quality makes me more closed-minded, makes me more frustrated, makes me more selfish or angry. And then we discern between them, and we decide which ones to cultivate and which ones we should try to let go of. And so discernment here has that quality of judgment where we are judging between things and we're discerning the characteristics of things, but we're using it in a way that's helping us grow, and also with the attitude of, even if we do have negative things, for example, maybe negative mind states, when we notice those, ideally we wouldn't be judging them in the sense of, I'm such a horrible person, I have this anger, or I'm such a horrible person, I'm so greedy, or I'm so confused and dull and sleepy, or I'm so caught up in thoughts and so on. Ideally, we would just discern the quality itself and try to grow from it, but not judging our own person, kind of building up a sense of self around it, or others, like thinking, oh, that person is so greedy, that person is so angry. Ideally, we would just discern or notice that this person has anger, this person has greed, and that's not a wholesome quality that we want to emulate. But we don't make that person into a kind of object of hatred for our mind. That's maybe what comes to mind for me. I don't know, Ajahn, if you have other thoughts on this topic.
Well, I think those are really good considerations. One thing that comes to my mind is I remember, looking at the question immediately when it came up, and thinking that there are considerations regarding connotation and denotation, and also these change over time. And so I wonder, what and you discussed some of those aspects, and anytime we're talking about words in English being a living language, as they say, is it's constantly changing, and so someone who's thinking about which word to use. Okay, now I'm talking about this in terms of words, but actually it may not be about the words, actually, maybe about the mental faculties. But anytime we use words in English, we have to we have to wonder if we should refer to the dictionary that person was using at that time when they picked out the words, which is, I think, an important issue for reading, for example, suttas and so on, in translation, which may not be at all what this person, Tan Nick, is thinking about, but it's the kind of thing that came to my mind, and perhaps tangential, but still perhaps worth thinking about. So yeah, thank you. I think that's all I'll mention on that.
Okay, I didn't see any clarification from them, but if you do have clarification, we could possibly look at that later on as well. Thank you, Ajahn. Okay, this is a question from Rob. Oops. Rob says, some people perceive Buddhist monastics as emotionless. Are monastics allowed to turn to others to help process their strong feelings and emotions? And if so, who?
It's probably my turn. Actually not good.
Yes, please.
So yes, certainly they are. Yes, and Buddhist monastics are by no means emotionless. So yes, by no means emotionless, and they certainly can turn to other people to talk to whenever they need to, as long as they can find a sympathetic ear, and hopefully their teacher would be someone that they could talk to as well. So yes, that's perhaps enough really to say on that. But something the masters emphasize is that in Thailand is that prat bin chao ban, bin muk chao ban, you say in English, people are the monks. Monks are people too. So, and they're really very, very human. The more you get to know them, the more you realize that these are really very human people in every aspect. And so, yes, maybe I'll say that. Sometimes sometimes I mean, one thing that strikes me is that sometimes they're considered emotionless in an idealized context. Like even the concept of enlightenment, meaning that someone is emotionless, which is not true either. Someone who is awakened is not beyond all emotions, even so. Someone who is enlightened, for example, still has access to and uses the four Brahma Viharas, the loving kindness and compassion, sympathetic joy, and equanimity, for example. But they don't have emotion, kind of the suffering emotional states. And they say that the enlightened heart, even having disburdened itself of all sankharas, has three characteristics: it's pure, and it is wise, and it is compassionate. Something about the innate quality of an enlightened one is that they still have compassion. So maybe I'll offer those thoughts.
So, I heard that in Burma the monks don't smile.
Not on camera.
Not on camera. Oh, I
which
see.
is quite
Makes better sense. Yeah.
quite common in Thailand as well.
Oh,
But
really?
yes, as soon as so Thai is kind of funny. Is Thai monks are they're quite jovial actually, like Thai people in general. And so they'll smile quite a lot. And they joke around and they laugh a lot. So if you pull out a camera, though, suddenly they're all poker face. They're supposed to be very serious. So, yes, but once they get to be older, then they can smile and joke around a lot. So, but they're younger. It's the real deal of Buddhist monks. You heard it here.
Okay, Mariah has a question. We smile on camera.
No, we smile on camera.
Is it possible to experience change or letting go as a result of listening to the Dhamma in person? And Mariah says that she's noticed a lasting change since hearing a Dhamma talk a few weeks ago. Is this possible?
Please go ahead.
Okay, well, I don't know if this is what you were going to say, Altron, but what I was going to say is, if you say that you've experienced this and then you asked if it's possible,
Sadhu. Okay, there you go.
then I don't know if the question is per se necessary. But I would just say that maybe what I would maybe add to this is, when you say experiencing change or letting go, maybe the kind of nuance would obviously be to understand that there are different levels. Someone could change profoundly from hearing someone speaking. It could change their life, just hearing just a short phrase or talk or lecture or encounter with somebody even. So of course, I think we should recognize that the Dhamma is no different. But obviously we don't want to underestimate or overestimate ourselves too much. So maybe that's part of the question. I don't know if this is a question about is it possible for someone to attain a stage of enlightenment while listening to a Dhamma talk? Which in terms of the discourses, in terms of the suttas, there are encounters where monks or even lay people will speak with the Buddha, and the suttas or also the people, they might say that they attain some stage of enlightenment after hearing the Buddha's discourse or a monk talk. For example, the story of Venerable Sariputta that Bhante Sumita told a few weeks ago. But I think even, of course, if you've noticed lasting change since the Dhamma talk, then it seems like you don't have any need for the question. And I hope that your practice grows and that you develop for the better, Mara.
Sadhu. It's actually, it can't hurt to check with someone, actually. I was talking before about my initial response was the same as yours, Iwata, And I think that partly the reason I had that initial response is I find that people can be quite mistrusting of their own feelings. And but it's important to be able to trust your feelings too, you know, and your own experience. But also, it's good to check with people on some things, you know. It's like I was saying earlier about the internal monitor and the external monitor. But yeah, so anyway.
Okay, we have a question from Rick.
Maybe after this one, we see if anyone in the live audience has any questions also. Okay.
Sure. Rick asks, how should we make preparations for our death, and what should we do with our body? What is in alignment with Dhamma?
Oh, okay. Well, so I apologize. There's so many things I could say. What should we do with our body? So, whatever, what you do with the body isn't so important. The body itself not being something is so important. Whatever, you know, suits your conscience and doesn't feel burdensome to other people and so on like this, and is legal, should be fine. Some people donate their body to science or for organ donorship, these kinds of things, which can be good ideas also, I think. But perhaps whether you have the body buried or cremated or something like this, it doesn't really matter from a Buddhist point of view. So no need to be concerned about that. I think in terms of making preparations for our death in general, so speaking purely in religious terms, we can prepare ourselves by learning how to let go and letting go of this body and of this life, and kind of pausing, thinking about what to say. As I mentioned, there's so many different kinds of things I could say, and I think Rick, you tune into Monk Chat very frequently, perhaps every Friday, and you have questions, and so it's my thought that you've been practicing for a while now and studying for a while now, and you're a very thoughtful person. And so different people have different ways of preparing for death. And so what comes to mind, perhaps you might find interesting, is the recollection of death. Remembering is one of the 5 recollections, that we are subject to dying because we have not gone beyond death. If we attain enlightenment, then we go beyond birth, being born again, but still we must die in this life. You know? And frequently recollecting this can help us to come to terms with this, help the heart to come to terms with this, and prepare itself for that. You know, also going hand in hand with this are the other 4 recollections. You know, I am subject to aging. I have not gone beyond getting old, and I'm subject to disease. I have not gone beyond getting sick. Everything that is dear and pleasing to me will change and will be separated from me, which I've read also can be translated as I will change and be separated from everything that I hold dear. And then the 5th one being that I am the owner of my actions and I'm dependent on my actions. Whatever I do, for good or for bad, of that I will be the heir. And you can see, I'm sure, how these recollections can go together. As at the end of life, we must be separated from everything we hold dear, if we haven't already been separated from it. And we are the owners of our actions. And the Buddha taught us to consider that when we go into our next life, we'll be dependent on our actions for a good rebirth. And so we want to have very good sila, that is keeping our precepts. And we want to practice generosity and meditation to help us with rebirth. Perhaps more immediately, this recollection of death, as I mentioned, it helps us to let go and come to terms with death. Because even though we may know intellectually, we know intellectually that we will have to pass away, the heart doesn't necessarily understand this. And this is evidenced by the fact that when we experience major changes in our lives, such as old age, you know, the aging process, when we get sick, it can often be surprising to us. You know, why did this happen? I'm surprised this is happening to me. and so on like that. And if we go into the doctor's office and we get a prognosis that we have 3 months to live, I think all of us know that there'll be some surprise and it's quite possible some negative emotions will come up: denial, anger, grief, these kinds of things. And that's because while we all know intellectually that we must pass away, the heart doesn't necessarily understand this. And this is important because it's the heart that initiates emotions and sustains emotions. And so if we prepare ahead of time for this process by making the mind calm and contemplating frequently these kinds of things, we'll grow in wisdom. And this will help us with all these processes. And we'll be motivated to do more and more good things to help us as we go into the next life if we don't attain enlightenment in this one. So perhaps that's what I can recommend. I wonder if you have any additional thoughts.
No,
Okay.
good. Thank you. I think we wanted to check if the audience have any extra
Right.
thoughts.
Victoria.
Do people still donate their bodies to monasteries in Thailand? And did you experience that while you were over there?
I actually don't recall hearing of an instance like that, except one where a lay supporter donated their skeleton, and it was put on display in a glass case in a monastery. Yes, I've heard that is relatively common in Sri Lanka, and actually, the bodies will be taken out to a monastery. So in Thailand, it's quite common for monks to go view an autopsy, but I don't know if that's even if the consent of the deceased is involved or not. I have to admit so. Yeah, and so I wonder if we'll see the day when that starts happening in the West. It could be very beneficial. It's quite interesting because it's one thing to think about it. It's one thing to see pictures. But it's a different thing to see it in person, and quite dramatic. I remember going with groups of monks to view autopsies, and these were meditation monks who had been actively contemplating, the parts of the body, for example, for years, and it would be quite a surprising experience to see it right in front of you, And I remember one monk getting sick, and another monk is saying he was describing how he'd gotten sick, looking at it, and so you can become ill. This can happen, but also can be a very powerful learning experience. Especially if you make the mind calm in advance. So I'm talking about a very particular kind of case of how beneficial this can be. If you make the mind calm in advance, then the heart can learn more thoroughly, and the effects sink in deeper. So it's very beneficial. All right, back to those who tuned in remotely.
Okay, here we have a question. Is there any prophecy in Buddhism that an extraordinary and supernatural event might very soon take place in the realm of humanity that is part of a cycle, such as the physical appearance of a Brahmin? Okay, is there any prophecy about an extraordinary and supernatural event that might very soon take place? Well, Ajahn Wade mentioned 5, actually. The 5 regular recollections. So this is really the Buddha's biggest prophecy for what very might soon take place in the realm of humanity.
That's right.
It's part of a cycle. Yeah, that's really what comes to mind in terms of, I think that's probably what the Buddha would, it's kind of more in line with maybe how he would answer probably a question like this, but I can't obviously say, I don't know. There are prophecies in Buddhism, but in terms of the realm of humanity, very soon taking place, not so much anything that comes to mind, though there is a prophecy that's quite common in Buddhist countries about future Buddhas. So specifically the prophecy that in the future other Buddhas might arise, or essentially the prophecy is that another Buddha will arise in the world. and that this Buddha is named Maitreya Buddha, or in Pali Mitteya Buddha, and that this Buddha will appear once the conditions are ripe. One of them being that the current Buddhist teaching and kind of community no longer existing. So naturally, Buddhism will fade from the world, and then the prophecy is that a new Buddha, the conditions will be ripe for another Buddha to arise and then teach the Dhamma. And so you could add into this maybe the prophecy that the Dhamma will disappear. And this is also part of a kind of cycle. So there's the idea that the Dhamma disappears, and then a new Buddha arises and teaches the Dhamma, and then that Dhamma lasts for a while, and then it changes, and then eventually it becomes more and more distorted, and then eventually it'll disappear. And so this is kind of a cycle of the Dhamma arising, changing, and disappearing in the world. And it aligns with the prophecy of the arising of Buddhas in amongst Buddhists. And then there's also the kind of parallel prophecy of what's called a wheel-turning monarch, or a wheel-turning monarch. And this is a person who is essentially the secular version of a Buddha in Buddhist thought, you could say. And so this is a person who, it says that they conquer the whole world, but they rule righteously. And I don't know if this is so, I don't know, appropriate to go into all the details, but briefly speaking, the way that it works is kind of interesting. Is it says in the text, at least, that the way this works is that a wheel actually appears in the sky, and the king or the monarch will be very ethical and follow the precepts, and he'll essentially form a kind of relationship with this wheel, and then he'll travel around, and other people will see the wheel in the sky, and they immediately obey the king. He doesn't have to conquer violently or anything. He doesn't do that. They just immediately follow, and they all follow through the rule of the precepts and the rule of righteousness. And so that's also kind of a prophecy, you could say, that's parallel to the Buddha, because it's said that a Buddha and this wheel-turning monarch, that both of them have similar characteristics, but it could kind of go either way depending on how the person, what the person ends up doing. So for example, it was said that the Buddha could have become a wheel-turning monarch, but his conditions were for him to become a Buddha. So that's another prophecy that's maybe talked about. I don't know, Ajahn, have you heard about other prophecies that you want to bring up?
No, those are, let's see, I said no, but I think from a canonical point of view, right, those. There's actually a prediction. Apparently, what I've been told is the meditation masters of Thailand say the Maitreya Buddha will be a wheel-turning monarch first, and so then he'll renounce the throne and then seek enlightenment. Which reminds me of the phrase in as I recall, it's in the suttas where the Buddha says the Maitreya Buddha will be a king of Buddhas.
I'm not so familiar with Maitreya Buddha.
Okay, so there's not much said about him in the sutras as I recall, but I think it says he'll be a king of Buddhas. But so of course you made the reference at the beginning of your answer to the five recollections, and which is very very apt. I think they said that there are both positive things and negative things, predictions we can count on. Old age, disease, and death, and which can happen to us at any time. This is not necessarily what you might call extraordinary and supernatural, but but karma also can be, and we are the owners of our karma. So we each, from the point of view of miracles, we could say that the chaitana, the ability to make a decision to do something good, is quite miraculous in terms of the returns you can get for good karma. It says in the suttas, for example, that if you give something to an animal, it'll come back to you 100 times over. And if you give something to a human being, it'll come back to you 1,000 times over. And if it's a virtuous human being, it'll come back to you 10,000 times over. And so at one point in the suttas, the Buddha says that the best kind of miracle is teaching. And one of the things he taught us is about karma, and it's another kind of miracle. I think this ability of people to make decisions to do things like that, will bring such wonderful things into their lives. There were apparently predictions amongst some of the meditation masters in Thailand of the COVID pandemic, And one of the predictions made in association with it was that people who have good karma will not suffer nearly as much as those people who don't have good karma. And this is that is kind of a prediction I've heard in recent times, but I haven't heard of any forward-looking ones. And we'll have to see if any come forward.
Okay, we have, it looks like a question from Raya. Let me just check. Looks like we have 3 parts here. Okay. So Mariah says she broke the first precept and laid ant bait in her kitchen, which killed many ants. She took them out eventually because she felt so guilty. And the last week she was bitten by a spider and stung by 2 bees. Could this be a result of killing the ants? Or is it being superstitious to make this connection? Oh, I'm sorry. Okay, so this is related to a previous question. So this is the main question here.
I broke the first precept and laid ant bait in my kitchen, which killed many ants. I took them out eventually because I felt so guilty. And last week I was bitten by a spider and stung by 2 bees. Could this be a result, yes, of my killing the ants? Or am I being superstitious to make this connection? Well, right. So we don't actually know. I say some people who are really excellent meditators could tell you, but unfortunately I'm not one of them. But it theoretically could be, yes, by Buddhist philosophical standards, and yes. So theoretically could be. I'm not sure what else to add to that at the moment. But I wonder if you have anything to add, Iwata.
No,
Okay.
I don't think that's about as much as.
So yes. So yeah.
Do you have any more?
So maybe what I could recommend is that it is possible to share loving kindness and merit, and merit being to share something from good things that you've done with others, and they have this in the Theravadan tradition that you can share loving kindness with them and share merits, meaning that when you do something good, that it has some meritorious value, so the good karma, bring good results in the future. You can't actually share the good results with someone else, but when you make an intention to share merit with someone, then it will have a positive effect on them in the immediate present. And so this is recommended by the meditation masters in Thailand. That is to share merit with your parents and deceased relatives, and also any beings you may have harmed in the past. And you can just think of it that way very simply, sharing the merit of any good deeds you've done, all the good deeds you've done, with any beings you may have harmed in the past at any time, even in past lives. And they say this is a very good practice to do, and so I can recommend that. And so in turn, you're making good karma. And it says in the suttas that if you keep making good karma, it's possible to stay ahead of your bad karma. And so maybe that'll be comforting. This can help you stay ahead of bad karma for the future, and hopefully lessen the number of bee stings you experience and other kinds of problems.
Okay, so John asked about other questions. Rick has a comment. Maybe I'll just read this out briefly. Rick says, "Thank you, Ajahn, for your in-depth reflections and compassion." And he started practicing in the late 1970s. At 61 years old, he knows he's getting closer to the final stages of life. Sadhu for the help. Looks like.
Sure, my pleasure. Best wishes to you, Rick. May you prosper in the Dhamma.
Okay, maybe we'll just take a quick look if there are new. Okay, it looks like Mike is new. So we haven't had a question from Mike. Okay. Mike asks, with regard to the Velama Sutta, would online or automatically recurring donations be karmically lower than making in-person donations? Also, would monetary donations be lesser than essential goods? Asking because it mentioned inattentive giving, not with one's own hand. Okay. Okay, I'm not recalling. I don't recall the details of this sutta offhand. Do you recall this one? Okay.
No, right.
Okay.
Not the details. Yeah.
Okay. But what I could say, maybe, okay, initially I would say that I don't know. I don't know. So I can only speculate. And my speculation would be that one thing we could say is that the Buddha says that karma is intention. So let's say that you set up a kind of automatic donation going on, and then you forget all about it. And then the payments go, or whatever you're donating, it goes, and then but you're not aware while it's happening. So you had the intention at the beginning, which was to set a recurring donation, and that intention of establishing recurring regular donations, that intention is different from saying just a one-time donation. So at that time, you created a particular karma, a particular intentional action. But then you could say that every time it donates automatically while you're not aware of it and you don't have the intention of giving, then you're not making new karma at that time, we would say, because you're not creating new intentions. Versus, let's say that every time it goes through, you make the intention that you're not going to cancel it, and you intentionally reflect on that, and you intentionally think, I'm consciously giving this over. I'm consciously allowing this to automatically process. Then, at the very least, even the intention of recollecting it and of being rejoicing in that action going through and bringing it to mind, that is also an intentional action, which will, you could say, maybe strengthen the intention that goes into the karma, because otherwise it was only done once, whereas this time it's actually regular, repeated, conscious, reflected on, and rejoiced in. So it's kind of building it up in the mind. And so what I would kind of speculate is that probably the karma is greater, more powerful if it's done in that way, while also keeping in mind the idea that probably even if you did forget, it's not like you still had the intention at the beginning for it to be recurring. So it's not like you're doing something bad. It's still something great. And you could also reflect after the fact, because you could even reflect, oh, after all this period of time that you've been giving these regular donations, and that can be a source of joy, and then it can be very maybe joyful and uplifting for you. So it's nothing to be, I don't personally think it's anything to be concerned or worried about. It's more a matter of like, how much goodness can you, it's more goodness, but it's not any bad that's going into it, at least in my opinion. And then in terms of the difference between online donations and in-person donations, this also, I don't know. But my feeling is that probably for most people, giving something to someone in person might bring up stronger associations and intentions and memories and mental kind of engagement. Like, personally making something and handing it to them, there's that kind of person, that interpersonal act of generosity, I think, can be very powerful. Whereas if it's online, maybe sometimes the mindfulness can be very weak, right? Sometimes people might give a donation or they might send something online, and it's just the click of a button. They don't see any people, and so it might flash by and it might not create a very strong impact. But on the other hand, someone could also kind of lazily hand something over to someone, and in contrast, someone could very intentionally, very mindfully, very joyfully donate something through online means. And in both cases, they are actually intentionally doing it, and they're intentionally, it's not with the hands, but they are intentionally with their hands, maybe clicking the button, right? So there is that intention there going on. So again, I might speculate that possibly for many people, giving it in person would be more powerful, but at the same time, both would be good. I don't know, Ajahn, if you have any thoughts on this matter, any reflections?
Not really. I guess you covered it very thoroughly. I think each situation you have to kind of judge for yourself, because it's very complicated. In some cases, making financial contributions is all you can do. So or in some cases, giving something physical property in person is the only way. And so you can I think you can get a sense for yourself in different circumstances what might be more meritorious, but kind of just, especially if you're able to make the mind calm for a few moments, take a step back and kind of simulate for yourself and think about, well, how will this feel? and your felt sense actually may be somewhat of a guide in terms of if you have a choice, what might seem to be more meritorious. So maybe I can offer that.
Well, it looks like we're back to some other questions, John.
Okay.
So we actually accidentally did Mariah twice.
Okay.
So that's okay because everyone will still be getting questions. So let me see if we missed any. Okay. John had a question here. Have you ever dealt with a period of constant failure in some domain? He says he's dealing with failure in many domains.
Oh.
If so, how did you handle it? So far, you see the disadvantages of anger, and he's curbed it. Any thoughts?
He's curbed it. Okay.
So dealing with constant failure.
Can I see the first part of the question again?
Yes.
It's that one there. Okay. Thank you. Okay. Okay. Speaking of anger, I'm guessing when you're saying you can see the disadvantages of anger and you've curbed it, which sounds like a great success. Sadhu, if you're going to be successful at anything, curbing anger is a very important one. And so I don't know how it compares to the kinds of the failures you're experiencing, but at least you can look at that you are succeeding in something very important in terms of curbing anger. There's something so hard to do also, and so it's really impressive. And so the anger, okay. I'm a little bit curious about what the anger is about and who it's directed towards and so on like this. If you're angry at yourself for failing, or if the kinds of failures you're experiencing are spiritual failures, like failures in terms of managing your emotions, or if they're kind of, other kinds of things like failures of productivity or work or something like this, because there's such different kinds of situations. Have I ever dealt with a period of constant failure? Probably, but I may have some kind of a mental block. Nothing's coming to me right now. I'm sure I've dealt with, I've definitely failed quite a bit in my life. So, let's see, I've dealt with periods of constant failure. Let's see, put me on the spot. What if you answer this one I want? It's kind of a joke. Who wants to talk about periods of constant failure in the life on camera? Okay, on the internet for the entire world to hear about. All right, so maybe if we talk about, this is interesting. If we think about questions in these kinds of situations, is sometimes people ask like really, really personal questions. And, is often noted by Buddhist monks. Westerners will do that. I don't know if any of Thais doing that. I ordained in Thailand back in 2014, and so I lived in Thailand for 10 years. That's my context of my monastic experience. I just came back to the United States in the winter of 2023, so February of 2023, and so been back in the States for about a year and a half or so. This is something that's noted by teachers in the West is, boy, you go into an audience of Westerners and they'll ask you like the most personal, probing questions in front of everybody, and so, but if we talk about how to deal with failures, our own failures, I think one thing is there's so many different ways, and it may depend on the kinds of failures and so on. One way is you want to try to keep a balanced emotional outlook on things, and so. If you look, for example, at the successes you've made, this can help deal with any feelings of deficiency or frustration with oneself. And so, for example, you've made success right there in dealing with anger. And that's something that's very valuable to look at. So you want to try to keep a balanced view on things. And you can look at the aspect of this, that the failure actually can be very educational. This is a positive aspect to failing, actually. That we can learn a lot from our failures about so many different things. I remember reading a story. It was a story about martial artists, and a master in judo was talking about training the son of the prime minister of a Western country, and the son's first big match was coming up, and the prime minister said to this trainer, this judo master, he said, "I hope he fails. I hope he loses." And not meanly. It may sound kind of mean how I just said it, but just more like the judo master understood it as he wanted his son to learn what it's like to lose, and to gain the benefits of learning about losing, which can be many different kinds of things. Humility being one of them, for example. And also how to come back from failure, which is an important part in life, an important part of life, an important thing to be able to do. That everyone's going to fail at some point or other in life, and learning how to bounce back from it is very important. So if we and something that's actually kind of inherent in your question is perhaps the recognition is kind of jumps out at me that this is temporary. You mentioned that you're dealing with a period of constant failure. And while it may seem like one thing after another is failing on you, you're failing one thing after another, there's this period in which it's happening. And there was a time before, and we're going through a period of change now. Even though there's a lot of failures, it's one thing you kind of notice is consistent about it. You're going through a period of change now, and you're going to be growing through this, as you have with your curbing anger. And eventually this period will end. And by persevering and learning, you will grow in multiple ways, growing in wisdom and growing in skills related to whatever the endeavors are that you're working at. And perseverance itself is a spiritual virtue that whenever you use it, it grows stronger. And then in the future, it'll always be there for you. One of the teachings of the meditation masters of Thailand is that as you develop your parami, usually translated into English as your perfections, I sometimes say the spiritual virtues. As you develop your parami, they grow stronger and they can never be reduced. And so that's just one way that you'll grow by persevering through this time, and it'll always be there for you in the future. And so there are many positive aspects of this as well.
Okay, so Rick has a question here. How many people in the world live a moral life and practice loving kindness? Is this common or more rare? Oh, I don't know. I don't know. Maybe the essence of the question. I'm trying to just kind of get a sense of the essence of the question. Because I feel that the statistics are probably not so important to what you're asking. Though I don't know the statistics. But I feel that one of the things we actually mentioned prophecies. One of the other prophecies in Buddhist thought is that there are periods of virtue and non-virtue. So like there are periods that the world goes through where people become more and more virtuous, and then there are other times where people become less and less virtuous. And the Buddha, he kind of, at least in the text, there's kind of this discussion of social and personal change, this interrelation, right? Like, for example, when there's people become very impoverished and then they don't get support from the government, then they start stealing. And then they start stealing, and then it kind of snowballs, and everything starts to kind of go downhill because this sort of moral fiber starts to break down, and there's no really infrastructure to help support virtue, and then everyone starts getting entangled in that. And I think we also know, we learn very young, ideally, from many people that we are very absorbent from the people around us. So when other people are less virtuous, we become less virtuous. There's a tendency. And when other people are more virtuous, we have a tendency to align with them. And so I think that probably whatever the state of the world is, hopefully by practicing virtue and practicing loving kindness, we can have an effect on other people and help contribute to the positive rolling of the cycle, rather than contributing to the negative decline. We want to help build up the positive, because I think that's another aspect of this that's maybe important, is that it's not like we should resign ourselves. Like, oh, the whole world is unvirtuous, therefore this is just our fate. But actually, it's the people's decisions to be unvirtuous that then affects other people, and then it snowballs. It's this effect of everyone giving in. So if we can practice loving kindness and practice virtue, then we can make it more common, because at least one person's doing it more. And then ideally, the people in our environment will also see that and want to practice the same way. John, did you have any thoughts?
No, that's great. Let's see. Yeah, that's great. I wonder if I bet that there are statistics though. I'm curious actually, when people do practice these things, and it's amazing to see how much more people are meditating these days. And I don't know about morality. I wonder how many people are following something like the 5 precepts now compared to. But even just in 10 years, having gone to Thailand and come back to the States, seeing how much more widespread meditation is, mindfulness, for example, in the United States, and loving kindness, I think also, and it's so impressive. I wonder, from the people here, how many of you have noticed, has there been an increase in morality in the United States? Or in whatever circles you go in?
Depends which circles you're running in.
Okay.
Well, but I think people are becoming like more conscious consumers, like thinking about where they're getting the things that they consume. In this way, it's like this kind of ethical consumption becoming more mainstream. Like, is this fair trade? Is this coming from a conflict zone? These kinds of things. It's becoming more normal for this to be a part of like packaging and that kind of thing.
Okay.
I definitely have seen, I became a vegetarian when I was 11, and I feel like there's a lot more individuals thinking about not eating animals. So that may be a positive.
Yeah, right.
Well, you, Bill?
Yeah, I think, I mean, these things are true. I think like in the secular mindfulness, one of the things that's lacking is there's not a talk about moral virtue being a foundation.
For like mindfulness practice.
Correct. It's hardly ever mentioned. And did that for 10 or so years before, becoming a committed Buddhist. And it was until I took a course with Analio that I understood that is the foundation.
Oh, wonderful. Okay. If you had to give a, say, more or less or about the same for if people grow in morality over like the last 10 years or so. What do you think?
I'd argue more, although some people, because of the advent of like social media and the internet, we tend to see more like negative things. But if you pick up any history book, I mean, just atrocities are just extremely commonplace, and they still occur nowadays, of course, but it seems to be less of a widespread trend. This is one way of looking at it, though.
Yeah, right.
There's less. There's so many factors that you can look at. Less human trafficking, although it occurs in the world. Like less slavery, although it still occurs in the world. And so these are some metrics.
Right.
More attention to mental health too, I think, has spurred things on a bit.
More attention to mental health. What do you mean?
Yeah. Well, the utilization of meditation and mindfulness in more mainstream psychology might be something to do. Not for everyone, but it might be a factor.
Okay.
Yeah, I wonder, I've thought maybe that this is one of the aspects that's maybe lacking from the ethical discussion. I wonder, it almost seems like maybe because of the separation between, in the West, there's a separation between science and religion, and psychology went down the route of science. But so then the idea of religion is often ethical principles, but I think it's hard, we can't really pretend that, when we do bad things, we don't feel good, and when we do good things, we feel very good, but it can seem very religious maybe to teach that to people. They don't want to hear it, because they're not religious. So I think maybe that's a part of our growing. I wonder if as a society we start to accept like it's okay to say that being ethical is part of our psychology. It's part of our it's something that is not just a religious kind of concept, but it's something that we need to take into consideration for our mental health. I wonder if that's maybe it's going towards that direction because of the
Oh,
mind
very interesting,
meditation is a gateway for people. I wonder.
Great, right.
I don't know.
Ah,
Maybe not.
interesting. Okay, yeah.
It-
Hopefully.
It's ironic, for me at least, because at least like ancient philosophy in the West is very rooted in ethics being a foundation for happiness. I think there's a general trend now with Buddhism becoming more mainstream and people turning to things like Stoicism or, yeah, just like even just classical texts in the Western canon. Ethics is a very important part of happiness in psychology, but it is neglected in psychoanalysis, like generally. I think with the intention of like trying not to judge people sometimes, but ethics requires discernment, kind of going back to this topic, so it's interesting.
Some more questions. Should we see Ajahn for these or?
Sure, I think so.
Yeah.
We'll go up to 9, right?
Yes.
Okay.
Okay.
Anyone here have questions? Don't hesitate to get it.
I did have a question. I am not exactly sure. I have like an intuition about how this might be viewed, but I have a question about the teaching on the fact that one is the owner of their karma, and that sankharas or intentions are not mine. This I am not. This is not myself. So just wondering what, like, just any thoughts on this kind of teaching.
Yes, I think it's just different ways of teaching. So the skillful means, in terms of teaching, that maybe that's a better way to put it than different ways of teaching. Skillful means in terms of teaching. This comes up sometimes. An example that I think of is the practice of mudita, or sympathetic joy, where it's described in the sutras as the wish that may beings not be separated from the good fortune they have attained. Right? But then we have in the 5 subjects for frequent recollection that we're subject to, that everything that is dear and pleasing to us will change and will be separated from us. Yeah. And so, so I think it's the use of skillful means to teach and for us to develop skillful mental states. And so, so sometimes the words in the canon can be taken very literally, and sometimes they're less literal and sometimes very figurative. And so, it's a matter of discerning those kinds of things, I think.
I remember seeing a similar discussion, Ajahn, about the Buddha saying that you should take yourself as the refuge, be your own refuge with no other refuge. And people saying like, well, what about the 3 refuges? And it's like, well, it's not really in conflict with the idea of the 3 refuges.
Right.
But it could be read like that. And it is a question like, well, should we rely on the Buddha Dhamma Sangha or should we rely on our own practice?
He also mentioned in that sutta immediately afterwards with the Dhamma as your refuge.
That's
so
true.
It's like, in a way, I kind of take it as like, because you could also argue that there is no self, so what are you even talking about? But like I guess in the Buddha referring to himself or when he teaches as that being the Dhamma and the Dhamma being him, it's like one kind of embodies the Dhamma in a sense.
Okay, well, we did have some questions here. Looks like some comments and we have a question. Lydia asking, can you repeat what the in-house people say, please? Okay, maybe we'll keep that in mind, Ajahn, for the future.
So
About what people say here, they couldn't maybe hear.
Oh,
So we'll try to repeat if anything
sure.
in comments. I saw a question, but now I'm wondering.
Should we repeat that question we just answered from Anthony?
Sure. Yeah, if you'd like, Ajahn, in the middle of the program.
Sure. Question was. The question was. The question was that Anthony asked. Anthony is one of our lay residents, and he said that he asked if we consider the teaching, "I am the owner of my karma," and how do we hold that in consideration of the fact that it says in the sutras also that all sankharas are not self, and so that was basically the question. Yeah.
Okay, it looks like we don't actually have, I don't think any more questions here, except for one. We have Would the Venerables, out of compassion, please wish yourselves well, so we can all rejoice in your immeasurable merits and share in your great good fortune?
Sure. Sure. Practice some loving kindness meditation for myself. Okay.
May you also be well, Joe.
Right. Best wishes to you, Joe.
Okay, we're either
Okay.
if there's no more questions, unless there's any in person, or otherwise I think we'll be closing. Unless any appears in the next minute or so.
Wonder, how about if we do, okay, so should we, okay. Well, I wonder if we could, I'm trying to think of how to close. We've got some extra time. Wonder if everyone would like to hear a blessing. Have to have a blessing. And see one person. Okay, not very enthusiastic.
Doesn't hurt, right?
Okay, we got four yeses, one kind of mild nod. It's teasing a little bit. Okay. Yeah. And yeah, so we could we could do a blessing chant. We're also going to wait. So I wonder, what do you think, Ayawana? If we bring up, we've done it a few times here, the chant, the pujas of just like rivers from the Fourth Sangha chanting book. We could bring that up here. We have to bring it up because I know the Pali, but I don't have the English memorized. What do you think we could? Okay, do you think we could do that? The Pali and the English together. Of the traditional blessing chant.
Okay.
There's a traditional blessing chant done in Thai Buddhism that also has elements in common with a chant done in Sinhalese Buddhism. We typically do it in the Thai. We typically do it at meals. It's a meal blessing, and it's a form of rejoicing in the good deeds of others. Because because people offer food to the monastics, and we give this kind of a chant as a rejoicing chant, also called a blessing. And I think we'd have to bring up the if you search for search for the Forest Sangha chanting book. We could even go to forestsangha.org and then look for their chanting book. Okay. And but people rarely know what it means because we usually chant it just in Pali. So recently here at the monastery, we've chanted it a couple of times or a few times in English as part of the morning or evening worship. And so maybe we can close this session by rejoicing in the good deeds everyone is doing, listening to Dhamma, and in practicing in general. There are various kinds of religious and spiritual practices. And yeah, so we'll do this. Ayawada's just brought it up here on the screen for us. And I wonder if I could tilt this to see if you can see it well. I wonder if we could. Does that look good to you?
I can see it.
Okay. It increases the contrast. Now I can see a lot better. I wonder if we can make it bigger. I'm kind of an old guy now. Maybe we can zoom a little bit. How old are you, Ayawada? Yeah.
I'm 20.
He's 20. I'm 52. 52 and envious. All right, here we go.
How's this?
This is a good time for old guys. This is a good time for old monks. Thank you. Okay. Yata varivaha pura paripurenti sagaram. Just as rivers full of water entirely fill up the sea, evam eva ito dinam petanam upakapati, so will what's here been given bring blessings to departed spirits. Ichitang patitang tumham. May all your hopes and all your longings kipam eva samichatu come true in no long time. Sabbe burento sankapa. May all your wishes be fulfilled. Chando panarasoyata. Like on the 15th day the moon Mani Jyotiraso Yata, or like a bright and shining gem. Sabitiyo Vivajantu, may all misfortunes be avoided. Sabarogo Vinasatu, may all illness be dispelled. Mate Bhavatwantarayo, may you never meet with dangers.
Sukhi
Dikayuko Bhava, may you be happy and live long. Abhivadana Sili Sanichang Uttapachayino, for those who are respectful, who always honor the elders. Chattaro Dhamma Vadanti, Ayuvanno Sukhang Balang, four are the qualities which will increase life, beauty, happiness, and strength. Bhavatu Sabba Mangalang, may every blessing come to be. Rakantu Sabba Devata, and all good spirits guard you well. Sabba Buddha Nubhavena, through the power of all Buddhas. Sada Soti Bhavantu Te, may you always be at ease. Bhavatu Sabba Mangalam, may every blessing come to be. Rakantu Sabba Devata, and all good spirits guard you well. Sabba Dhamma Nubhavena, through the power of all Dhammas. Sada Soti Bhavantu Te, may you always be at ease. Bhavatu Sabba Mangalam, may every blessing come to be. Rakantu Sabba Devata, and all good spirits guard you well. Sabba Sangha Nubhavena, through the power of all Sanghas. Sada Soti Bhavantu Te, may you always be at ease.
Sadhu,
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 sadhu.
Oh, that was so nice to do.
Found it. All right. Did you want to give closing remarks, Ajahn, for us?
Okay, sure. So I guess that concludes our monk chat, and we start up doing live streams again next week on Wednesday, morning and evening, Wednesday, Thursday, and Friday. And some of our venerable friends doing them off-site, some of them being done in-house here. And we also have some in-person Dharma events, Saturday and Sunday as always. So Saturday from 6 to 7:30 and Sunday from 1 to 4. Sunday is actually an all-day affair. If you like to come for it, it's quite a nice time. Volunteer opportunities in the morning, starting as early as 8 a.m. And a large group gathers for the meal offering and putting food right into the monks' bowls here within the monastery. If you'd like to come for the meal, we ask you to arrive by 10:30. And then in the afternoon, as I said, the Dharma event, tea at 5 with a question and answer, and then evening worship service. So come for any or all of the day. And Bhante Sudaso is back. He arrived back at the monastery Monday evening from his stay in Italy. And so if you'd like to take advantage of the opportunity, it's a good chance this weekend to come in and pay respects. Yeah, so I wonder, is there anything that I missed?
Have a good night.
Have a good night. Okay. And may you prosper in the Dhamma.